Hey everyone, welcome back to Data and Donuts. My name's Aaron. I'm here with my friend and colleague Daniel Miramontez. Today we're going to talk a little bit about planning. But before we get into planning and strategy, I would like Daniel to tell us a little bit about himself.
All right. Well, first and foremost, thank you, Aaron, for inviting me on to Data and Donuts interview podcast. It's always a pleasure to be here. I basically am Dean of Institutional Effectiveness at San Diego Miramar College. I've been in my position for about a decade now. Currently working on our accreditation ICER report. Can't wait for that to be finished soon. But other than that, I'm also a father of two beautiful girls, middle school and high schooler, and my wife, and so very, very fortunate and very happy to, have a very well-balanced professional and personal life.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing so much. It's always good to get, time to hang out as friends and colleagues. And
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
definitely. So with that, we're going to jump right into our interview today. And so I know you've been working a lot with the statewide professional development group under the research and planning group for planning. And when I always talk to you, like, how do we put the P back into RP, into research and planning? And so based on your work over the last couple of years with this work group, what are a few ideas that have emerged?
Absolutely. Well, the RP Group Planning Task Force is working on a resource that will answer the following three questions. So, why do we engage in planning? How can we make planning effective? And what knowledge, skills, abilities, also known as KSAs, are needed to lead effective planning? I will answer this last question a little later in our interview process. This resource is expected to come out during fall 2023 term. It will accompany the planning results from the recently administered professional development survey this past term. So ultimately, this planning resource and survey results will serve as a basis for building out other planning professional development opportunities in the subsequent future. So that's really kind of where we are as a planning task force.
Well, that's awesome. I think a lot of the times when coming into planning sessions, coming into, creating either it's an operational strategic plan or a long-term visional master plan, a lot of the aspects that we ask is where do we start? And a lot of the times we hear the conversation, planning with the end in mind. What are you trying to achieve and where you're trying to go? So it sounds like this resource can really help provide that guidance for institutions who maybe need that additional, resource, help, or even inspiration. So I think that's really cool, and I look forward to seeing that.
Awesome.
So, since the pandemic, I think life has changed for everyone, not just work, but personal and everything. How have you seen planning evolve post-pandemic?
Great question. Planning has definitely evolved post-pandemic. I would characterize it as a shift from being institution-focused to being student-focused. Now, this is evident but with the adoption of the new accreditation standards that ACCJC just adopted this month. So let me talk a little bit about each of those standards. First and foremost, they're a lot more coherent and less redundant than the current standards we're under. So when you look at the first standard on institutional effectiveness and mission, it states that the institution has a clearly defined mission that reflects its character, values, organizational structure, and unique student population. That mission outlines the institution's explicit commitment to equitable student achievement and serves as, and here's the key piece here, guiding principle for institutional planning, action, evaluation, improvement, and innovation. So two key concepts that stand out here are we're looking at a unique student population that serves as a guiding principle for institutional planning, right? When you look at Standard 2, That in of itself, that name, student success, points to where ACCJC is currently are and where they're headed as an organization and working in companionship with institutions. And when we look deeper into this standard, it's basically in alignment with the mission and having the institution deliver high quality academic and learning support programs that engage and support students through their unique educational journeys. So academic and the learning support programs are going to promote equitable student success, and the institution evaluates student learning and achievement data to inform improvements and advance equitable outcomes. So here again within the standard, you see the term unique educational journeys that are centered on students and their equitable success. So just with standards 1 and 2, you're already starting to see that change from being institutional focused to being far more student focused. And then when you look at standards 3 and 4, those are really kind of the support standards, looking at standard 3 looks at infrastructure and resources. And a key thing to point out here regarding standard 3 is the institution organizes its staffing and allocates its physical, technological, and financial resources to improve its overall effectiveness and promote equitable student success, right? So there it's coming out again. And then finally, standard 4 with governance and decision making, the institution engages in clear and effective governance practices that support the achievement of its mission. So it really goes back to standard 1 when we look at the mission and looking at the unique student journey as the guiding principle for institutional planning. It used to be the other way around, but moving forward, post-pandemic, that's not the case no more, right? So I think that the standards best reflect planning that is post-pandemic, specifically standards 2 and 4, which focus on student success as well as governance and decision making respectively. So these two are very important for planning, especially when it comes to KSA's, knowledge, skills, and abilities. So that brings to mind a question for me. So what does this mean for our IRPE professionals? Well, this means that IRP professionals need to expand their toolbox into the realm of what I'm calling next level planning. Next level planning that is grounded in social interactions.
Excellent. And so I think a lot of that, and I think that's a key aspect, is, it's really looking at the experience. And it goes back to a lot of individuals where you say meet students where they are, finding your place. And it's not having the students conform to who we are, but conforming our work to meet them to achieve their goals. And what does that look like? And I think for clarity purposes, and it helps others to understand, is when talking about mission, it's beyond the mission statement. I think that's something that institutions need to hear a little bit more, because when they hear, your mission says, well, your mission is not just a statement. It's found in your goals, it's found in your plans, it's found in your vision and direction as an organization and institution. And I think as you broaden that out, and instead of trying to check the box that you're saying all the right words and meeting the formulaic approach to a mission, it's really looking at what's your purpose and what are you trying to achieve for who, and how is that spelled out through all the work that you're doing, trying to create a more integrated approach. And when I say integrated, I mean complementary, not just you can connect the dots on certain words and certain things, but actually working together in a consistent manner to achieve short-term leading indicators and long-term lagging indicators. Right. And I think those are key elements, is defining those almost like North Stars that you're trying to achieve and for who. I think being very intentional is going to be a key aspect that our institutions are going to have to be in planning, because, in the past you'd see a thematic goal of success for what, in what, for who, by when, and as you add more definitive, not objective activity, all these 4,000 layers, but really starting at the basis of what are we trying to achieve? Not something that's so nebulous, but consumable, not just by your stakeholders internally, but then also by the community by which we serve. So they know where you're headed and what that end game looks like for them, because they're the individuals who are on the receiving end of these plans or of these actions. And I think you're right, really bringing in what does it mean to the students? What does it bring into that aspect? It's a clear indication of a shift in planning, where in the past it would just be, I don't know, so we use the word nebulous, but sort of nebulous and broad, like retention, success, innovation, like what? And then being able to effectively tell that story, not like a one-off, like, hey, Daniel did this thing and it changed his life. Well, how many Daniels are at our school, and how do we represent Daniel across the variety of factors? So I think those are key elements as we continue to grow. I think you bring us some excellent points. And again, I really like the term you used with about like in regards to, I didn't know the exact words you used, but regarding the future planning, like I don't want to say planning of the future, the next level planning,
Next
basically.
level planning.
Yeah, and so I think that's really awesome. So when we talk about next level planning, what skills do you find are most functional to make this occur?
Well, next level planning is more than just a set of skills. Um, this is going to go back to the first question when I was talking about the resource that we're going to be putting out as a planning task force. Not only is it going to focus on skills, but knowledge and abilities too. So the total package of the KSAs, right, that are associated with effective planning. But since the question asked, I will start with skills. So when we look at skills, what's necessary to be able to not only survive but thrive as a planning professional moving forward post-pandemic? And so it's going to be relationship building skill set. In particular, when we look at relationship building skills, we can think of it as maybe building up our soft skills toolkit, right? What does that encompass? Well, how do we communicate with one another? Aaron, you brought up some really good points about it's not just checking off the box, or it's not just saying I've done X, Y, and Z in my objectives, but how do we communicate that with colleagues and especially with our students? Based upon communication, how do you build teamwork, right? That's a soft skill in of itself that's going to be very foundational, very important for planning professionals moving forward. So soft skills is one key component of relationship building skills. Another key component of a relationship building skills is facilitation, right? So based upon your how you communicate with one another and working with teams, when you're in a team setting, how do you facilitate that dynamic, right? So you're in there, you're not just checking the box, but you're actually going through some authentic brainstorming activities. And when you're doing so, it's important to be able to listen and to hear and to not provide judgment within that dynamic. So in essence, staying neutral, listening to what people have to say when brainstorming, because this is where some great ideas come from. But at the same time, you also have to stay on task. You can't just have a free for all and then kind of be like, okay, where do we go from here, right? There should be some kind of task and be goal oriented. So being able to have a set of facilitation skills is important. And also under relationship building skills, I would say what's important is participatory governance navigation skills. So important. Why is this so important? Well, it's important to understand the process for decision making at your respective institution, whether it be a college or a district, right? So who are the major players at the table? Oftentimes there are four major players or groups at the table. We have our academic senate. What about our academic senate? Well, they're the official voice of faculty. And when you look at the academic senate, Ed Code gives them purview over 10 academic and professional matters, plus one that's often negotiated by the board. Guess what's one of those academic and professional matters? Planning. So when the Senate is involved, academic Senate, they're going to take a position on planning, especially when you're the planning professional at your institution. And when they take a position, right, this is usually done in collegial consultation. So what does that mean? we're either going to rely primarily upon their advice, or it could be by mutual agreement as well. So that's important to be able to navigate and work with your local academic senate colleagues. What about the students? Well, the students also have a very significant voice, oftentimes through the Associated Student Government. So the ASG is the official voice of the student body, and they too have some subject matters that are pertinent to their existence at the college, which is known as 9+1. And guess what? Planning's one of them. And so you can see with Academic Senate, Associated Student Government, their authority is really grounded in Ed Code and Title V. But then there's also two other constituency groups. We have our Classified Senate, which deal with any items that affect them as a constituency group, and they're the official voice of the classified professionals. And then there's, of course, managers, right? Oftentimes your deans, your vice presidents, your president, or it can be chancellor's cabinet. And when it comes to the managers, they're the ones that most likely will be in charge of the resources. So when navigating participatory governance, it's important to know who the players are, what their respective roles are, and how to be able to navigate among those groups, right? And so laying a foundation for the process of decision making, because with governance, that sets the context for decision making, which brings me to my next point in the KSAs, which is the knowledge portion associated with effective planning. So when you look at knowledge, what does that mean? Well, if as researchers we rely on research to provide us content in the form of narrative storytelling, right? Well, if you want to be able to look at content, it's important to consider what is that context? What's that bigger picture? And oftentimes you'll find this in your mission statement at the local level, right? So what's your mission statement of your college? What's the mission statement of your district? But equally as important is what's the mission of the California Community College system that we've been under the last few years. We know that is the vision for success. So it's important to be context driven by understanding mission at multiple levels. In addition to understanding mission, it's important, vital to understand the student experience. We're no longer a system that relies on access only, but as I specified in the accreditation standards, the new ones, it's now a mission on equitable student success. And not only you find that in the new accreditation standards, but you're going to also find that in the vision for success goals. So it's important, again, to focus on that mission relative to the student experience. So when we talk about the student experience, I'm not really talking about the student experience from a researcher perspective, right? The metrics that we're associated with, the retention, persistence, but what does that look like big picture? For myself, what I find very useful in looking at the student experience are the 4 phases of the lost momentum framework, right? So you have students that come in, they connect with the college, and then when they actually connect with the college, then they enter the college. Once they enter the college and they go through matriculation and orientation, then they progress through the college, right, in the program of study, oftentimes relative to some kind of guided pathway, and then ultimately leading to completion. So it's important to understand what that journey looks like for each unique student population, right? And this is what data is going to tell you. Your data is going to provide that content, but again, you need that context to interpret what that data mean. And this is where your mission is going to come in. So now you're really kind of having that data-informed mission statement that are telling you who your unique populations are, and who is moving through your institution. But it's not just important. It's not just important enough to leave it to the phases of the student journey. It's important to understand what are the underlying factors. RP Group has done really good research and identified the 6 factors of student success. So while your students are here on campus, or if they're online, whatever medium that you're serving them in, you want to make sure that your students feel directed, are focused, nurtured, engaged, connected, and valued, right? So these are some really foundational elements of the decision-making process. Understanding mission, have the knowledge of the mission at the state, district, college level, as well as disaggregating that student experience at the kind of that aggregate level of the 4 phases, and understanding what you need to do as an institution regarding those 6 factors of student success. And so this brings me to the last point of the KSAs, the abilities piece that's associated with effective planning. So what does this mean for a planning professional ability? Well, this is to serve in the role as a facilitator. So I'm going to kind of tie this back to the first interview I had last year when I talked about what is strategic planning, what is integrated planning, right? When we talk about strategic planning process, we're talking about a process that requires a lead facilitator, right? So you're facilitating and guiding a process, oftentimes in the form of a moderator. That's what a moderator does. A moderator will take you from point A to point Z. Oftentimes you're starting with your mission, what's your mission statement, and then from there you're disaggregating your mission to get your strategic goals, directions, and some KPIs. As you mentioned earlier, Aaron, about lagging and leading indicators. So with our strategic planning process, it's important to take that facilitator role on as a moderator and help the college move through each of those steps in the strategic planning process. But so let's say you do that. What's going to happen when you get to the end of your strategic planning process? Now you've charted the direction of your college, right? That North Star, that's what the strategic planning process is about. And when we go back to that original definition of strategic planning, right, the Society of College and University Planning, it's a deliberate, disciplined effort to produce fundamental decisions and actions that shape and guide what an institution is, what it does, and why it does it. So in essence, you are shaping a structure for what the decision-making process is within your institution. But at the same time, what you're doing is you're putting an identity to your college now. But that identity is not the sole identity. It may be a primary identity, but there's also other functional type of plans, right? You may have a technology plan, a human resource, an equity plan, right? So now you're moving from the realm of just strategic planning to how are these plans going to work together cohesively? How are they going to complement each other, as you mentioned earlier, Aaron, right? And so you may have ownership over that strategic planning process, but somebody else in another division or a constituency group or within the participatory governance process may have ownership over the equity plan, maybe oftentimes in student services, enrollment management, over in instruction or academic affairs. So how do you mitigate those differences? Well, this is still in the role of facilitator, but rather than being a moderator this time, you're a mediator, right? So you're basically there to facilitate conflict resolution, leading to alignment and integration. And this is the basis of integrated planning and building an infrastructure that your college is able to take all these various dynamic components and have them work together in a way that sends a message to the community, to the students that say, this is who we are as an institution. We're here to serve your unique student journey, and we're going to provide not only quality instruction, but wraparound services that are going to get you from point A to point Z. This is who we are within our mission statement. This is how we're taking serious your student journey, and we're going to journey with you. And this is why we're here to be more student-centered, student-focused, and not just checking the box like we used to pre-pandemic, right? Where it was all about focusing on the institutional needs rather than the student need. So basically, what I would say when it comes to the KSAs associated with effective planning, it is important to build out your planning toolkit with the following, right? Your relationship building skills, such as soft skills, facilitation skills, participatory governance, navigational skills, knowledge of the big picture, right? Being context driven, such as your mission statement at the state, at the local levels, as well as understanding the student experience. And finally, playing that facilitator role, which is the ability to facilitate as a moderator, such as a strategic planning process, and or being a mediator for the larger integrated planning infrastructure that you're helping to build and sustain at your college. Because after all, that's what integrated planning is. It's a sustainable approach that builds relationships and aligns the organization.
And I think to me, as we think about this stuff, is really looking at culture. I think it's going to be a key element to what we're doing. And I think that aspect of culture is going to really help shape moving forward. And then as leaders, as facilitators, as moderators, how do we help that? And I think for me, one of the aspects and toolkits that I've seen and used myself is measuring the utilization, or almost I want to say utilization, let me refrain from that. Measuring the institution's readiness for change, capability for change, looking at their almost drive to be that institution of the future. Are you ready? I think a lot of times with planning, with activities, with events, we come forward like this is where we need to go because are you ready to have that commitment, that support? That's a first point. I think it's a foundation you lay where you can start with that, because as you develop a mission statement, do you have the buy-in from that institution? And you can get buy-in from different groups. You're not going to get 100% consensus. You're not going to be 100% of buy-in. But what does that look like? And that's it's like a rhetorical question, is because it's different at every institution. And I think the key aspect of that is really looking at moving forward. What does that mean as organizations? I think that's for me going to be the biggest factor. And I think that looking forward, along with all these great toolkits that are being provided,
I'm sorry to cut in. Am I freezing or you're freezing?
Where do we take this with our institutions? How do we understand our readiness? How do we understand, I think, our maturity in planning and strategy?
Hello? I'm not getting you. All right, I think Aaron dropped off and will be coming back in. There you go. Oh, you're back. Yeah, you were cut out and freezing. You want me to as well? Okay.
Okay, so we are back. And we'll go with that. So, with that said, it is working now. So
Okay.
I will stop the recording, start the recording again.